Now, first, I'll say people say, first of all, you're not happy, right?
I don't know if you can categorize it as that. I think it's not healthy to be upset at something that you know is broken in the first place. Like the structure of our playoff is just totally broken. So trying to make sense of it right now is chaotic. I mean, I don't have a huge problem with what they did, but they're clearly communicating some things that I don't think are good for the sport.
Like what?
Like games don't matter. I think that's bad for the sport. And I think creating two different standards of proof is not good for the sport either.
Let's start with the first one. Now, you're insinuating games don't matter.
That's right.
What the committee is saying is games do matter because we didn't put Alabama number one. But the games they have won, like crushing SEC teams by 40 in front of 90,000 on a Saturday night, those are more impressive than Oregon's wins on the road at a Pac-12 stadium that's empty and Michigan State having some.
Well, let's be very honest. The Ohio State loss and the Notre Dame loss and the Michigan loss are far better losses than Alabama's loss and Oregon's loss. Those are true statements. And that's, I think that's what frustrates people is that it's pretty clear that the committee, and I know that the committee has taken on different iterations and there's been different people on and it rolls around. But the problem is that the committee clearly just has this ranking in the top 4 or 5 or 6, and then they're just going to make it work behind it. And they're going to include teams in certain spots in order to make what they created at the top work. And I don't think that's good for the sport. Like, for instance, you probably haven't thought of this 1 second. What's different about Mississippi State and Penn State?
Yeah, neither's great.
But one's ranked 17th and the other's unranked. So the committee's telling me there's actually significant difference between the two.
Well, 17th's not ranked very high.
Well, unranked is ranked even lower. So Penn State has 2 wins against teams that are currently ranked in the CFP top 25.
Yeah.
Okay, so they beat Wisconsin in week 1. They beat Auburn at home. Okay. Now, they've got 3 losses. One of those losses was a bad loss in which they controlled the game against Iowa, and then they got their quarterback hurt, which the committee is supposed to take a look at.
Okay, so but
they also got beat the next week by a bad Illinois team, there's no doubt, but Mississippi State got beat by Memphis. So they're including Mississippi State at 17. Why? So that they can legitimately put Alabama at number 2. So it makes their resume look better, which is fine. It's just flawed.
I disagree with your premise.
So Mississippi State is substantially better than Penn State.
Well, if Penn State's 17, that's not ranked.
No. Penn State's unranked.
Oh, and Mississippi State's 17.
17.
So it's not like they're ranked high. 17th is you stink like everybody else outside of the top 10. So the other thing is momentum matters. When you lose matters.
Okay.
So Penn State is losing now. So it's one thing if you lose a little earlier.
You're right. It's one thing if you lose to Memphis early in the season.
Again, but we all know young people do change over the course of a season.
Okay.
So Penn State looked good early.
So then why isn't Ohio State ranked ahead of Oregon by your theory?
By the way, how do we know it wasn't inches, not feet? And by the way, because I would give Oregon because they won at Columbus. If it was at Oregon, maybe I do put them ahead or neutral field. But it was a win. And by the way, they ran for they must have run for 350 yards.
They ran for a lot of yards.
Okay, so I would put Oregon ahead of Ohio State, even though I think Ohio State's better physically.
But you started this whole thing with the integrity of college football is intact because we know Alabama is better and they're ranked number 2.
Well, they are better.
Well, how do I know? I mean, I saw a bad Florida team come within a 2-point conversion of tying them.
Florida's bad now.
Oh.
But at the time.
But Ohio State is good now.
That's right. That's why they're with a loss at home. We're always very brutal on home losses. We're very punitive. But we're moving Ohio State up despite a home loss because Oregon's pretty good. And because since then, Ohio State looks like they've improved.
So Alabama's getting the benefit of losing to a lesser team than Ohio State. Okay. Here's why.
Because they're Alabama?
Because if Texas A&M, let's just say, had beaten Mississippi State, right, when their quarterback was struggling, and they were a one-loss team as well. Then now all of a sudden we're going to have to put Alabama below Texas A&M because we saw that game, so Alabama would be like 6th based on no happening of their own accord, but just because Texas A&M would be a like-branded team. So because Texas A&M is worse, then Alabama gets the benefit of the doubt. And this comes into the two standards of proof. So we've got two standards of proof. First of all, in our criminal justice system, you've got to be found guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Right.
And in a civil case in our judicial system, in a civil case, it's preponderance of the evidence.
Right.
It's got to be found more likely than not that you did what you were accused of, and you can be found guilty.
That's right.
Well, see, Alabama gets included in the playoff by the preponderance of the evidence. And you're saying that's fine, but we have this other criminal standard against places like Cincinnati and other schools where it's like, we better know that they're better in order to get them in there. And I just think that that's a flawed system. Why are you saying the team with the more resources and the better recruits have an easier path based on a lower standard of proof versus a team that's trying to achieve their way into the top end of college football?
So let me answer that, because I always have an answer. First of all, I can be a little snarky. Somebody said yesterday to me, why do we even play the games? And I said, well, somebody's got to play in the Citrus Bowl. And that was a little snarky. There's a lot of reasons we play college football. It's not just to crown a champion. It's to give economically opportunities to people who wouldn't have them. It's for paying for the rest of the sports that all hemorrhage money. It's because of network contracts. It's because of 40 bowls. There's a million reasons we play. It's not just to crown a national championship. So that's why we play the game.
But that's why the players play.
That's
Colin.
right.
They don't care.
Well, a lot of people don't care about the speed limit, but, it's there. So here's my point. What you're saying is, we have this system where Alabama gets the benefit of the doubt.
That's correct.
Okay. Of course they do.
And that's fine.
Cincinnati plays road games, and there's 17,000 people.
And they also have a singular better win than any of Alabama's wins.
Of course they
do,
because for Cincinnati, they have a circle game on their schedule. We see this in bowl games. So the kids struggle against Navy, struggle against Temple. The circle game, You don't get that when you're Alabama, because you're all.
Oh, sure you do, because they struggled against Florida, and that's a bad Florida team.
And won on the road in front of 98,000. They still won.
But they struggled, and you just told me you can't struggle with bad teams.
I'm allowing you to struggle against
if you're
Florida.
Alabama.
No. If at Florida, not at Navy, you don't get to struggle against second tier in front of tiny crowds, in front of second, when you face Florida, you're facing a better staff, better athletes. You can't hear. Like, I give SEC teams, even Alabama or Georgia,
benefit of the doubt. I understand that. It's the best conference. I get that.
I give you one close road loss. If Bama loses at home, I'm more punitive. They're not there. I'm going to give you, even if the SEC team finishes 20th, I give an SEC team a road loss on a Saturday night in a game you led late and you lost in front of 100,000. There's 5-star athletes everywhere and a great staff. I'm going to give you one.
They do have a great conference. They have the most 5-star players by far. I believe it's 59 in the conference right now, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere maybe a little over 60. I believe the next closest conference is the Big Ten with 29 5-star athletes.
Holy Lord.
I mean, Georgia has 19 alone, and the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big 12 all have fewer 5-star players in their entire conference than Georgia has on their one team. They are the best conference, there's no doubt. The Big Ten East is likely the best division, singular division this year in college football. This system is unsustainable. What we have created, this system of postseason play, is unsustainable. We've shoved the entire meaning of college football into too narrow of a scope. So now you can't define yourself as successful unless you're in the playoff. But you can't get in the playoff unless you're a big brand, or if you're in this particular conference. And so there's all these barriers for teams to actually grow. So how is it that Cincinnati gets to a place where they can go to a playoff? Well, that's why we have to expand, because we've shoved all the meaning of our sport into these 4 teams, and it's way too narrow. We've also given all the power to this 13-person committee. And you've heard me say this before, but there's far too few variables in a 13-variable equation to allow for bias and then still have a reasonable outcome. We need more. We need to dilute the committee, because right now they're living in the edges of the bell curve. Okay, if you're familiar with the bell curve, you understand that the edges are kind of where the outliers are, and then you get the big fat part where that's the meat of the data, and that's where you want to sit. Yeah. If you're dealing with anything in terms of a ranking system or somewhere where you're trying to average out data, you want to sit in the bell curve. Well, this committee sits in the edges of the bell curve. There was only 16 AP voters that voted Alabama number 2. That's about 20% of the AP voters. Well, that's the edge of the bell curve. You're not in the meat of the bell curve. So we need to dilute the committee by either adding more members or adding more committees so that you can get a better look at a data set and even out some of the bias that you see on the edges of this bell curve.
See, we just see it differently. I want fewer media members voting. I want 4 people. Put Condoleezza Rice, Joel Klatt, some other smart guy in an AD, and I don't think the answer is ever more. I watch
it
CNN.
Is for
they
more
have 38
teams.
people on their show, and why don't you? You know who's a star? Oprah. I don't need 13 co-hosts. I think the answer in television and college football is always more and more, and more laws and more hosts.
That's right. So you've established during this segment you're all for dictatorships.
No, I am for fewer smart voices and smart. It would be ludicrous.
And mandates.
Today.
Yeah, I mean,
no, I don't like mandates.
Well, I mean, you do in the NFL for Aaron Rodgers.
It would be ludicrous today if Cincinnati was 2 and Alabama was 6. We'd be like, are we joking? They'd be a 17-point favorite over Oregon.
That's why we need to expand, is because I agree with you. Alabama is a better team than Cincinnati.
And Oregon,
I'm not trying to argue
Ohio
that they're
State.
not. I'm not trying to argue that they're not. But when you only have a 4-team postseason, then you've got to manipulate the data set in order to artificially keep teams that have earned their way in out, because we know that there are better teams. So why not just expand? Expand to 12. The 6 best champions go. 6 at-large teams, 4 best champions get a bye.
But you know what?
Now you're retaining the importance of the conference championship game. Then we can expand the importance where now at least you're not disenfranchising the fan base of Cincinnati.
A timeout. You know, due to college basketball's history, you can expand it to 68, and the 69th team still screams to Dick Vitale they're being robbed.
Right, but I'm not arguing about this team is getting robbed or not. I'm arguing that the meaning in our sport, the option to define yourself as successful, has been stripped away from college football programs across the country.
So,
it no longer matters whether you're bowl eligible or win a division, win a conference championship, go to a New Year's Day bowl game. None of that matters anymore, because all that matters is who's in, who's the four.
What you're saying,
so we're stripping we're disenfranchising fan bases all over the country.
No, you're not, because Cincinnati's going to sell every ticket for the rest of the year.
Why?
So,
because they don't even control their own destiny.
By the way,
why does it matter for Cincinnati?
But they still will.
But they would even further if they knew that a championship means inclusion.
So what you're saying,
because then those games are like playoff games, and now the Cincinnati fan base is engaged.
No, what you're saying, and I hear this a lot in society as a general rule, is we hate billionaires. A middle-class family can't be happier than a billionaire. It's all about money. Are you going to tell me the Cincinnati parents and the Cincinnati kids and the Cincinnati coach are not happy if they're 12-0, go to the Fiesta, win on that flight home? That is the happiest every 22-year-old Cincinnati football player has been.
I totally disagree. They would feel like what would have happened if were given a proper opportunity.
45-7
You're dictating from the top. So Colin wants to be the dictator and throw the scraps to the people and be like, be happy with your bread. Go home and be happy with your bread. Bread for everyone. Look at you. You're like the emperor.
Yeah, well, kind of this show. All right, let's get to this. So it was suggested to me, a friend of mine who's a Michigan State fan had a very funny line yesterday. He was talking about Michigan State being third, and he goes, how can we be third? We haven't beaten anybody.
Ah!
And it does.
How about that?
It is funny.
That's a good one.
I thought it was
a
very
good
funny.
One. Clever.
So Harbaugh can't beat his rival. He can't beat Ohio State. He can't beat top 10. I'm not saying this should happen. Should they consider getting rid of Jim Harbaugh at Michigan?
I don't know. I think that Ward Manuel, their athletic director, has kept everything on the table, in particular with the extension that he just gave Jim. Remember, it was a significant pay cut from what he was earning before, and the buyout, both for Jim and the school, is extraordinarily low.
That's right.
For major school standards. And so Ward Manuel, I think, is looking at this with clear eyes and waiting for games like this and waiting for a November like this, because we've seen Michigan be successful through September and the month of October, only to fall flat on their face down the stretch. And I think that what was concerning from a Michigan standpoint, because let's face it, Michigan State went out and earned that. And I don't want to take anything away from the Spartans, because their running back, by the way, he's the leader in the Heisman Trophy race right now with what he did on that stage.
Oh, yeah.
12.5 million people watching in the fourth quarter, and he's doing that. I mean, you put yourself right at the top. So Kenneth Walker, congratulations to you. You're at the top of my Heisman list right now. Now, on the Michigan side, the problem is, Colin, is that they controlled large portions of that game, and it was coaching errors that I feel like cost them. The inability to adjust to the tempo, and I kept talking about it over and over again. They were trying to substitute their defense in and out when the offense wasn't substituting. You can't do that. Yeah. That's a coaching decision. That's not a player's decision. Yeah. It's not the player's fault. I like Josh Gaddis a lot, but throwing a fade on 3rd and 3 with 1:50 after they had been driving down the field,
not good.
It's clearly 4-down territory. You've got the 5th-ranked rushing game in college football. Hassan Haskins runs on the field. He's a 220-pound running back, and they throw a fade on 3rd and 3, and then they get now you got to run a pick play on 4th and 3, and maybe they get away with a little bit of a hold, but you put the game in the officials' hands. Why you didn't run it on 3rd and 3? They did some things in that game from a coaching perspective that really cost them, and that falls on Harbaugh's shoulders.
That's right. Okay, so we've seen what the committee ranked. We got to get going here. Give me Klatt's top 10. I want to see this. So I like Georgia, Bama, 1 and 2. I'm good with that.
My ranking is going to look a lot like the committee.
By the way,
But my ranking in my playoff would be, if I was a committee of 1 and I was making a playoff, it would look different, because I want to reward teams for what they deserve, not just what I think is subjective and who's better.
Oh, so you almost have 2 systems too.
Sure. But why not just let Vegas do this? Vegas would do this better than some 13-person committee.
I've been arguing that for 20 years.
Yeah, because, and I saw your tweet last night. It's like, what are we arguing about? Georgia and Alabama would be, 14 and 16-point favorites, kind of like Ohio State was against Oregon and Alabama was against Texas A&M.
There's a reason.
But that's why they play the game, Colin. Let's honor the game, please, on the field.
But that is why they're called upsets.
Do you know what a scoreboard is?
I do, but there's a reason they call them upsets. We know that Alabama would hammer all these.
Clearly.
Wake Forest.
Can you believe Tom Brady has 8 Super Bowls? Because we know they were better than the Giants when they were undefeated. 8 Super Bowls, Joy. That's amazing. You barely fit all those rings on 2 hands.
I don't even know.
Congratulations, Tom.
I got to get some of these spots read. The show is very popular.
Go pay the bills.
Good
seeing you.
Good seeing
Bye,
you, buddy.
Joy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd, or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.